Got your tea ready?
I got my tea ready, always tea. Okay, so the transition zone. So you've all seen a picture like this before. North of us in the transition zone, they've got cold winters, they've got moderate summers, they're growing cool season grasses. South of us, they've got hot summers, they've got moderate winters, they're growing warm season grasses. In the transition zone, we've got cold winters, hot summers. What do we grow? Both, okay? And that's the answer, right? Both. How well do we grow both? Not very. So A.J. Powell, who had my job before I did and passed away a few years back, came up with the little phrase, we can grow all grasses equally poorly in the transition zone. And that's tough, right? If there's nothing that grows perfectly well, what do we plant? And so there are places for cool season and warm season, but we're moving more and more to Bermudagrass because of the strengths of the grass. All right, so this is an old slide I think I stole from Dr. Goatley, who just strolled in late, as always. Wow. So I'm getting it from two Kentuckians. They're from the same county even, these two. So if you've ever listened to Goatley talk with the mouthful of marbles, you understand what you're going to be hearing in a minute.
It's the same high school. We're the Sports Turf superpower here.
Is that right? That's good to know.
Yeah.
So anyways, not surprisingly, the southern area here, primary zone for growing warm season grasses all across the south. Secondary zone, the transition zone, where we have quite a bit of Bermudagrass growing, and more all the time. But here's what I'm proposing. A new zone through Kansas, through all of Missouri, halfway up through Indiana, Illinois, higher and higher and higher. So one thing that, again, your president and I don't necessarily agree on is that the climate might be changing. And I'm not jumping on any sort of climate change bandwagon or anything like that, and I'm not going to preach it at you today. But let me run you through a few things. All right. So NOAA, government-run website, really good website. What do you want to say anything about it?
Go ahead.
Okay. So it's a really handy thing. They've got some apps for you to use and all this stuff, but you can go and check records. You can look at forecasts, all sorts of different things. But the last couple of years, if you've gone on their webpage, this is what you're seeing. 2016, second warmest. 2017, third warmest in the history of the U.S.
So it's getting cooler. So it's not global warming.
That's right. So anyways, I'm just going to try and tune the comments out. So, something going on there, right? Temperatures are hotter than they have been for a long time. All right? The other thing you notice if you go to their website is that you see a lot of this. Through the transition zone, you're seeing a lot of increased temperatures. They're looking for it to be hotter than normal. And so typically when I go on there, this is what I'm seeing. Over the next 3 months, they expect it to be hotter than it usually is. And so they're saying maybe something's changing here. Again, I'm not preaching this. This is just what the government is saying. EPA, this is what they're saying. So looking at the state of Illinois, by mid-century, it's going to be like Mississippi, Alabama kind of temperatures. By the end of the century, we're going to have Louisiana-type temperatures in Illinois. So that's pretty crazy if that really happens, and that's a low-emission situation, and high-emission, I mean, it's Mexico kind of thing, which is crazy to think about if we have that much change in our climate. My issue with the EPA, though, is I think they're kind of alarmists. I don't necessarily buy into everything that the EPA says to me. And so is this accurate? Is it not? I don't know. I remember they used to have a graphic on their webpage with a bunch of lawnmowers, and they said the average home lawnmower puts out as much emissions as 20 cars, whatever, 20 compact cars. That's like, that can't be accurate. But anyways, EPA, they do what they do. So when the EPA says something, I think it's interesting. Do I take it to the bank? Not necessarily. But the USDA, they're a little bit more interesting to me. If they say something's happening, I'm going to pay a little bit more attention to what the USDA is saying. So this is the old USDA hardiness map. They came up with these over a number of years, these temperatures. And this map was used up until just a few years ago. But if you look at Kentucky here, we've got 5B in a couple of spots here in the mountains, and Most of the state there is 6A and a little bit of 6B down near the Tennessee line. All right? So that's the old USDA hardiness map. And all of these coincide with low temperatures, low average temperatures. So the higher these numbers, the warmer it is. All right, so the new hardiness map is this. So again, our coldest was 5B. 5B now is halfway up Indiana, Illinois. All right, 6A, we've gotten those couple little spots in the mountains. Most of the state is 6B, and we've got a little bit of 7A right down here at the Tennessee line. So on the old map, 7A was Memphis. So the USDA, based on temperatures over the last 20-some years, has said things are changing a lot. It's getting a lot warmer. All right? So whether we want to admit it or not, the records are showing this. This is what's happening. So, but we know it's getting warmer, but we still know that we're going to have years like this, right? Winter's coming. If we're putting in warm season grasses, we got to expect this at some point. That is not Kentucky. No. I went to Virginia Tech when you were there. You know, we're going to have cold temperatures come along at some point, and then what's going to happen to our Bermuda fields that we put in to do well in the transition zone? So we don't know. We don't know. So this could be any year that we grow Bermudagrass. This was a soccer pitch in Bowling Green, Kentucky, which is about an hour north of Nashville, so pretty far south, the year of the polar vortex. Widespread winter kill, devastation, right? Pretty much everything on that field is dead. All right, so that's not normal, but every 5, 6, 7 years, depending on how far north or south you are in the transition zone, you can expect something potentially this severe, at least with our old climate. On any given year, you could look at stuff like this. So high wear areas, you could be seeing some more winter kill than any other areas, even if it's not that cold out, just because the combination of the traffic and the cold weather could result in loss of...
Is it winter kill or wear kill?
So it's a combination. So you're losing grass, you're weakening the grass from the wear, and the cold comes in and it has a weakened plant to take out. All right, so this year, with it being colder than normal, I've gotten a lot of questions so far already. What's going on with the Bermuda in Kentucky? So we were warm up until about Christmas time. After Christmas, it started getting cold. And these are our air temperatures for the past few weeks. So the coldest we got was -2 on January 2nd. That was our nighttime low. The highest we got during that time was 30. So it was below freezing for a couple of weeks straight. So people started getting a little antsy, what's going on? The longer it stays cold, the more chance that there's going to be some kill. So I sent my guys that work for me out to get some samples from our NTEP Bermuda trial and bring them inside and start greening them up in a window, and they had frozen soil. So that didn't work really well because they couldn't get a cup cutter into the ground to pull samples. But the other day, I went out and we warmed up for a few days in between cold snaps, but I walked the entire NTEP Bermuda trial and dug around in the plots, and every plot looked good. There was green stolons in every plot of grass that we had out there, whether they were cold tolerant or not very cold tolerant. So that was encouraging to me. But then I went to the traffic test to see, well, does a combination of traffic and cold temperature, did it catch us? And digging around in the worst plots that we've got, you can see we've got green stolons, fewer of them, so less chance of recovery, but we still have green stolons. The plants are still alive. So we were cold. There was no snow cover. We didn't get caught. But the difference between this and the polar vortex, that polar vortex year, we were down to about -17 Fahrenheit. So huge differences in how cold the air was. It didn't stay as cold as long that winter, but it was obviously much colder.
It was, vortex was 14, -17 was 2015.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Stealing my thunder.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I don't want to step on your toes.
Yeah, you do it all the time.
All right. So Our forecast for this week, though, as of last Friday, more cold, and until lows of 2. My wife told me this morning it was 3 degrees in Lexington, and warming up this coming weekend. So I just pulled up the forecast before coming over here, and now they're saying by Friday we're going to be in the 60s, and it's going to be 70 by Saturday. But the nice thing about this week, yeah, we've got another cold week, but we got a couple inches of snow. And once you have snow on that surface, it's a totally different animal. You've got an insulator that's not going to make it as cold. Yes, sir. Moisture, that's
Later on in the talk, when I'm allowed to talk without being rude, I'll have a slide with moisture content from December 1st to March 15th, from 2010 all the way up until last Wednesday, over the time frame. But so far this year, as of last Wednesday, we were below average moisture by a little over 2.5 inches. Yeah. Yeah.
You don't want to be excessively wet, but you don't want to be dry. And somebody asked me earlier, which is better? Well, neither one of them is better. Can you just make the water go away if it's excessive? Not really. And then if it's dry, if it's really dry, if your irrigation system's still on, it may be worth putting a little bit of water out. But there's not a really good answer. Neither one, dry or really wet, is a good situation.
And most of our area, if you don't blow your irrigation system out, you're asking for trouble. And so all the irrigation systems are already winterized, so you can, energize it back up and get some water out, but then you gotta re-winterize it again.
In that trial, you were walking, checking out different varieties.
Yeah, all sorts. There was whatever there is, 20-some varieties or whatever is in the trial. So the interesting thing about going back to this, we got to -2. We didn't go above freezing for a couple of weeks, but I went out and did soil temperatures, and at the 2-inch depth, the coldest that we got was 30 degrees. So that's really not that cold compared to our air temperature. And so soils are really good buffers of temperature. And that's a good thing. I mean, we don't want them to get too hot very quickly. We don't want them to get too cold very quickly. People ask me, what about you've got these fluctuations in temperatures coming up? If it's going to be 70 this weekend, well, is that going to spur the Bermuda to start waking up? Well, no, again, on the flip side of that, the temperature of the soil is so highly buffered that it's going to take a long time for that 30 to raise up to 50, 60, 70 to start waking that Bermudagrass up. So the fluctuations that we see during the wintertime aren't that big of a deal typically because of the soil temperatures being buffered. All right, some causes of winterkill here. There's a lot of these things. There's several things that could be going on. One of the biggest ones is just what cultivar are you growing? There's some great cultivars out there that have really good cold tolerance, but there's some that are not so great. It shouldn't be grown in the transition zone. And so starting with that's something that's really important. So how cold it gets, what cultivar you're growing, and then how long that cold period is are all factors. Shade is an issue. So University of Louisville, they've got this brand new, beautiful soccer facility. Absolutely gorgeous. Prettiest soccer field I've ever seen. Soccer stadium, I should say. But they built this big canopy over the stands, and you see, this is summer, you see the shade that's coming out on the field. As the summer turns into fall, that shade starts to come out more and more onto the surface. And so heavy shade is a factor for losing Bermudagrass because it's colder on those areas. Plus, your Bermuda's not as healthy going into the wintertime because it's not getting the light that it needs for photosynthesis. So this turf manager at U of L, Mike Winkenhofer, if you've never met Mike and you've never been to Louisville, it's worth the trip to Louisville to meet this guy. He's the most interesting. He's like that guy that drinks beer on TV, the most interesting man in the world or whatever. He is an interesting cat. Go to Louisville and meet this guy. He complained to the people building this that this is going to shade the field and we're going to run into issues with the grass. Oh, well, deal with it. And so to me, that's one of those goofy things that admins do that, something you're going to have to spend money on every year, and it's going to be a problem for you every year, but it's not our problem, it's your problem. And so kind of goofy. You have anything to add on that?
No, not really. I know the shade, like the shade you're looking at right now is that's more so in the spring, but in the cooler months of the year, it actually extends out onto the actual playing field. So it'll come 10 to 12 feet inside the closest touch line there. So it's a really bad shade issue. And if you have, poor drainage and you have heavy shade, you have it turning to ice, it's going to stay ice longer.
So you've read all these things by this point, but all of these are factors in what can cause your Bermuda grass to go south on you. And we can't control a lot of these things. We don't see extended ice cover a whole lot in the transition zone occasionally, but not all that much. But we can control some things like winter traffic. What's the plant health going into the wintertime? That's an important thing. What are the things that we're doing to it to make it as healthy as possible? And thatch, obviously, we can control that as well. But some other things like north-facing slopes, not a whole lot we can do about that. It is what it is. So we just do the best that we can. So along these lines, I got together with a few other turf folks in the transition zone, Dr. Goatley, Cale Bigelow at Purdue, and Brad Friesenberg, now officially retired from the University of Missouri. Congrats, Brad. We got together and we put our heads together. What are the things that sports turf managers should be thinking about to try and keep their grass alive as they go through the year? And so we came up with this publication. It's on our website. You can see the link there. Dr. Goatley's got it on their website as well. And I'm not sure about the other two schools, but some things to think about as you go through the year are listed in this publication. So check it out if you have not seen it. So a few of the things that I'm going to just walk you through, some of the things that we have in this publication over the next couple of minutes before handing it off to Marcus. So with our mowing, obviously Bermuda grass, we can take it down pretty short in the summertime when we get good playing conditions, good ball roll, things like that. There's no magic number, for really how short or tall. Obviously, if we get below a half inch, it's going to start maybe thinning out a little bit and getting harder to manage. And if you get really tall, it may be a little bit hard to play on. But somewhere in this range is a pretty good range to think about. But as we go into the fall, raising the height up a little bit can sometimes give you some benefits. And so if you're going to do that, it's not necessarily one of those things I would go to my boss and say, hey, I'm raising my height from a half inch to an inch. Because the first thing that they're going to think about is you're going to wreck the playing quality of this field. But if you slowly bring that field up over time, slight increases, you're probably not going to affect ball roll whatsoever, and you're probably not going to really affect playability, not so much that anybody would ever notice that what's going on with that surface. So having it a little bit taller, you may get some increased carbohydrate capture from longer leaves, catching more sunlight. Insulation, we may get, that's one of those things that's a little bit gray to me, but some insulation from air temperatures down to the canopy, the top of the soil. And then this has been studied a lot, though. Taller mowed grass can withstand more traffic than shorter mown grass. And so if nothing else, that one to me makes a whole lot of sense. You're going into the time of the year, if you're talking football, with Bermuda grass where it's slowing down. And anything that we can do to keep grass on that surface is a good thing, in my opinion.
And also, taller mowing heights in the fall. If you don't phrase mow or anything in the spring, you're going to have more leaf tissue area to absorb sunlight coming out in the spring for green up.
So moving on to overseeding, this is one of those things that we love to hate. I love the look of overseed. Getting the stripes on that surface, just compared to Bermuda grass, which doesn't stripe very, very well at all, just looks so good. But, we're essentially planting thousands of weeds into that Bermuda grass stand. So not necessarily something that makes sense agronomically, but playing-wise and recoverability and all that stuff, just one of those things that we have to do. So things that we may or may not know about overseeding. So usually we're talking about perennial ryegrass when we talk about overseeding. So I think that's something that's pretty well established. You all familiar with Blue Muda at this point? Seen a lot of head shaking, kind of, sort of. Yeah, so Blue Muda is not this. Blue Muda is planting or interseeding bluegrass into the Bermuda grass canopy and growing them both year-round. Totally different animal than putting a whole bunch of this in and then killing it off in the spring. If you want to know more about Bermuda, we're doing a ton of it at Kentucky. A lot of golf course superintendents and athletic field managers in the state are implementing it now. But Friday morning, Brian Wink has got a talk on it, and he'll tell you the ins and outs of Bermuda. Planting rates, depending on who you talk to, 5 to 30 pounds per 1,000 square feet. I've certainly seen people go higher than that as well, which is just crazy. Your budget must be through the roof if you're putting 40, 50 pounds of seed on a year. Not surprisingly, if you keep that overseed in, your Bermuda grass is going to start to get thin in the spring. You've got competition going on there. And so the longer that ryegrass stays in, the worse that Bermuda's going to look. Do you remember back at Virginia Tech when I was there, they had a ryegrass field. And it was a Bermuda grass field, but because they never did a good job of spraying off the ryegrass, I think you might have been the turf manager then. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Because the ryegrass never got sprayed out, it ended up being a ryegrass field because it eventually just took out the Bermuda grass. It was they compete. Ryegrass has a allelopathy that doesn't like to keep other grasses around, so it just turned out to be a ryegrass field. And then this is really interesting to me. Sean Askew at Tech came up with this, that Bermuda grass needs 60 to 100 days with no competition to get the carbohydrates back to where that plant should be. And so if you think about that, if you spray your perennial ryegrass out May 1st after baseball or whatever, 2 to 3 months later is July 1st, August 1st. You don't have a whole lot of time left in the year to get that plant as healthy as possible and getting ready for fall again. And so anything that slows down green up in the spring, we run into issues with this. Weaker plants going into the next winter, which could result in more winterkill that next winter.
So, Dr. Munshaw, before you go any further with that slide, I'll talk about overseeded Bermuda and spraying it out a little bit. Our soccer field at UK's Tipway 419, the spring of 2012, so the fall of 2011, spring of 2012, we had noticed that the longer you leave your ryegrass in, the weaker that your Bermuda is going to be that summer, going into your football, your soccer, fall baseball, whatever your field may be. So in the fall of 2011, after the last soccer game, we sprayed sulfonated urea on our soccer field. We sprayed it with Katana. We covered it up for the winter. Come springtime, because we have spring soccer, we have two teams, men's and women's. We uncovered our field. The ryegrass was as tall as it was the last time we cut it back in the fall. The ryegrass was still green. And about 2 weeks after we took the covers off, all the ryegrass died. It went completely dead. So spraying it in the fall before we put the covers on stunted it. It took all the active ingredient up, the poison up to kill it. And then we took the covers off. They played on it for a couple weeks. Then it turned brown. They didn't think really a whole lot about it. But before April 1st, we had 90% Bermuda green up on Tipway 419, which I was like, man, that's freaking awesome. This is great. Like, I figured it out. I'm a genius. And then
I think that every day.
A week later, the low got down to 13 and there was a frost again, and it went completely dormant. But getting the Bermuda out early is huge in getting the overseed out, getting your ryegrass out early in the spring is huge in how well your Bermuda is going to come back that spring and that summer and how strong it'll be.
So yeah, along the same lines, the year that they took the Tipway football stadium out at UK, was that the polar vortex year? It was a cold year regardless. And I remember tweeting out a picture on June 1st. It was a year later. Okay, so June 1st of the polar vortex year, how good that field looked was just looked perfect for having such a really hard winter on it. He's got covers on there, and he's going to talk to you about covers a little later. But if he can have that good of a stand of grass June 1st, being ready for recruits and the whole deal, how do you convert? How do you make that decision? And so, again, I'm beating a dead horse here, but
how do we hire a Canadian to run our turfgrass program? I don't know that either.
You think that we don't get along, but we really do.
Yeah,
we do. All right. So a few of us in the transition zone got together to do a little bit of research with ryegrass and just see, what do we see with this stuff? Is there something to overseeding? Is it bad for the Bermudagrass? Does it matter? And so what we looked at was we planted some ryegrass at 15 and 30 pounds per 1,000 square feet. We looked at canopy temperatures through the winter. So basically we put temperature probes at the soil surface, and they measured every hour for several months. So we had ridiculous amounts of data. We also looked at carbohydrate status of the Bermudagrass through the entire winter to see, does putting that ryegrass in there hurt the carbohydrates as they go through the winter?
How do you measure the carbohydrates?
What do you mean, how do we measure them?
Well, it says you measured the carbohydrate status.
So, well, you take the plants, you grind them up, and then you do all sorts of lab extractions. So it was something that was actually done with some of Goldie's co-workers at Tech, but there's a whole process to it.
I'm just a dumb Kentuckian.
I wasn't thinking that at all. So we looked at what happened with the carbohydrates through the winter, and then looked at what happened with the Bermudagrass in the springtime, just to see, obviously, that some of the things we knew, some of the things we didn't know, but just get all these things measured. So not surprisingly, the things that we found, it looked better in the wintertime than non-overseeded grass. And you can see that they're different rates of the the ryegrass versus none. It looks better. And so obviously that's one of the reasons that we do it, one of the big reasons. Spring density certainly was affected. We had less Bermudagrass where that ryegrass was kept around. No effect on carbohydrates whatsoever, and so no real negative effect on the actual Bermudagrass through the entire winter. It's just that transition period in the spring that really matters. And then temperature increase. Because of those probes in the soil, we were able to see, do we get any more insulation from this ryegrass in the stand? And you can see there we didn't get a whole lot. 1.1 degrees Fahrenheit is not enough to really write home about. Maybe save a little bit, but it's not enough. All right, traffic management is a huge deal when we're talking Bermudagrass in the wintertime. So obviously as you go into the fall, the plant just can't recover, right? And that's one of the reasons why we plant Bermudagrass, because it recovers so well after traffic. But during that time of year, it just can't do it. So, in those areas where we're getting excessive traffic, we can probably expect some loss of grass, especially if it's really, really excessive. So this is one of our NTEP Bermuda trials, and this is the one that we traffic. And we've trafficked this test for, I think, the last 5 years now. And you can see the traffic lines where these plots are thinned out like crazy. And you saw how thin they were from that picture where I showed you the green stolons. But what we found over the last number of years is these are the grasses that have done excessively well holding up to traffic. Extremely well. So Tifway, Tip Top, numex-sahara, Patriot, Riviera, Astro, North Shore, Latitude 36 have all performed better than normal. I didn't include the experimentals on this because some of those will be turned into cultivar, some of them won't. There's just no reason to show them until they become something. The ones that didn't do all that well, the bottom of the pack, Princess Yukon Cashmere Celebration. So for just taking a beating, the ones on the left there, those are the grasses to go with. And so here's kind of what we're seeing, Tifway versus Latitude versus Riviera. I'd say Tifway and Latitude may be slightly better for traffic tolerance than Riviera, but all three of them are spectacular. All right, so which one of those three grasses should we not plant in the transition zone, especially the upper transition zone?
Riviera?
What did you say about the dumb Kentuckian? No, that's not nice at all. I take that back. So what's that?
I said I get the microphone last.
And obviously he did keep really pretty Tifway in Kentucky, but Tifway does not have the cold tolerance that the other two have. Excellent traffic tolerance, but not the cold tolerance. So once you factor in cold tolerance to this mix, then what? So on the flip side of our traffic, we come back and look at, well, traffic and green up. Where are we at? And so you can see, looking at these plots, huge differences in how much grass is coming back plot to plot there. And so several of these grasses that were on the good list North Shore, numex-sahara, Tifway become not so great when you factor the winter in there. And that's something that really should matter to us the most in the transition zone. This is where the rubber hits the road. It's not just about, is it a tough grass? Is it a pretty grass? Those are fine, but if it's not going to make it through our winters, it doesn't matter. So here's kind of what we're looking at for these grasses that will survive. So again, the things that should matter the most, cold tolerance, followed secondly by traffic tolerance, and then things after that are just less important to me. The aesthetics of the grass, still very important, but not as important as grass being there in the spring. So Latitude, Tip Tough, Northbridge, all really pretty grasses, all very similar looking to Tifway. And so that's a good thing to me because Tifway is still probably the standard for me for athletic fields. Great looking grass, good thick grass. If we've got grasses that are that pretty and can take a beating, we've got something. And I think we do have that with those three. A couple of so-so ones to me, they still are good for cold tolerance and traffic tolerance, but they just don't have the looks of the other ones. Patriot and Astro, and then Riviera, still a great grass, and we use it a ton across the transition zone, but it just does not have the looks because it's lacking density and it's got a coarse texture compared to the other ones. But all good grasses. All right, winter traffic. This is some work that I did when I was at Mississippi State back in the day, and we just wanted to look at if you traffic Bermudagrass in the wintertime, what happens to it in the spring? So we went out with the traffic simulator, and we had no traffic where this big X is, and we had traffic only if it was dry, and then traffic anytime, whether it was wet, dry, or whatever. And wanted to look at what was the effect on green up. And so you can see there, March 20th, greens up way earlier in the south than it does in the transition zone. No traffic whatsoever, greening up like crazy, versus the other one. So the traffic when it's dry, greened up a lot slower, but still faster than when it was wet, because you're just destroying everything, especially when it's wet with that traffic on there. And so any traffic in the wintertime is bad traffic, but especially if it's wet, that's extremely bad traffic. So things to think about during the wintertime. So wet fields, we all know about this. It's just not a good situation. These fields are going to tear up. You're going to get obviously displacement. You're going to have poor footing, all of these things. And we know what happens if kids are playing on wet surfaces. You're going to get them torn up, but you're also going to get compaction. Wet soils compact much easier than dry soils. Results in harder surfaces. Here's a Goatley quote, and I think this is, I've heard Goatley talk a ton of times. Goatley's a spectacular guy, but this is the best thing I've ever heard come out of Goatley's mouth. And I don't know if it came out of your mouth or whether I stole it off another slide, but the key to a successful athletic field is 90% drainage and 10% common sense. If you don't have enough common sense, install more drainage. That's just one of those things that sounds like a Goatleyism, but it's simple enough that it just totally makes sense. Drainage is critical for us. So, whatever kind of drainage works for you, in-ground drainage is spectacular if you got the money to do it. The only thing that I would say about this is a lot of times I see people put in their tile and then sand or rock, and what's the last thing they do before getting grass on there? What's that?
Grade it.
Grade it with
soil
right over the top. Yeah. So what happens to your drain?
It's capped off.
It's done. You just wasted your time and money. If you've ever seen that old Washington State University soil water movement or whatever it's called, the soil physics lab that they did, watch that. It's on YouTube. It's the most fascinating thing you'll ever watch. I'm not even a soils guy, and it's so cool to see what happens to water movement in soils under different conditions. And they show something just like this, a capped off drain versus a drain that's open to the surface, and how much more quickly water moves into the soil when it's continuous column to the surface. So just make sure that you're not getting that soil over the top of your drain system. Crown's obviously very important as well. Obviously we want that surface water to move to the sidelines. I was speaking in Eastern Kentucky a number of years ago on this topic, and somebody in the audience interrupted me and said, "That's a bunch of garbage." crown's a bunch of garbage? What? I didn't follow him. He said, yeah, it's just, it's not worth it. What do you mean it's not worth it? Water doesn't move off the field. So water doesn't move downhill is what, so this was my first year at Kentucky, and one of the first presentations within the first couple of months of me being there, and here's this guy heckling me. And, we're kind of like stand-up comics. We have a thin skin. We can't take much heckling. But this guy was just hard on me about this water does not move downhill. And now if I was at that same meeting and he said something, I would probably be a little bit uglier, but one of those situations where how do you argue with somebody that says water doesn't move downhill? Why would somebody ever create a crown if it didn't work? And why would these be in every textbook you ever saw if they didn't work? And obviously they do work. They work really well. They get all that excess water off the surface. So people will hear me say that and then go out there and fix their crowns. So if you're going to fix your crown, don't do it the Kentucky way. This is a high school in Louisville. Obviously, back in the day, it's an older picture. But can you imagine kids playing on that? So if you ever seen Kentucky's football team play and you wonder why we're not as good as the rest of the SEC, it's because our kids are beat up at the high school level because of the fields we have to play on. This is why the football office hates me. No, I kid. All right, so compaction. Another issue with wet soils, obviously, is that they compact. And you can see here in this image, it's wet. Like I said, wet soils compact more so than dry soils. But you can see there, by this tire track going over this area time and time again, it's physically pushed the soil down, right? There's no doubt about it. So we've got this situation over there, very little air spaces in the soil. Makes it so the plants aren't happy. All right, we got to have that turf health thing going for us. So if we've got the compaction, that's obviously one of those things that we need to think about. This is probably the best image I've ever seen on compaction. These are corn plants grown in different levels of compaction, and you can see the differences there. Obviously, very high compaction, no root system, very poor growth on top, versus no compaction, great growth on top, root system all the way down through that test tube. Huge differences. So plant health, if that matters to us whatsoever, compaction needs to be one of those things that we're paying close attention to. And so obviously people are getting wind of this, that hard soils result in more injuries. We're starting to see more and more of these things. People are charging a lot of money to come out and test fields to find out, are they hard? Are we going to see potential injuries because these fields are compacted? And so obviously we don't want this. If we're playing on wet conditions where the field is going to get tore up and compacted, I mean, this is just a double negative for us that down the road, we're having to spend money to fix this, and by doing some work up front to keep people off of it could save us a lot of money and time. So, situations like that, if you can keep people off with signs, policies with your bosses, whatever the case may be, do what you need to keep people off those fields that are excessively wet like that, because it's going to cause you headaches and obviously loss of Bermudagrass if extreme enough. All right, a little bit on nutrition here, and then I'll pass it on to Marcus. So last year, Marcus and I gave a similar talk, but we only had an hour. Yeah, so he's complained to me for the last year that he didn't get to talk, and I spoke through the entire thing. That means literally for a full year, and so I'm going to make sure that I get off this. We're almost out of time.
Exactly.
No.
Come on now.
So soil test. Do your diligence with this and get your soil tested. Know what your soil needs. Very, very important. I bark about that all the time. So with Bermudagrass, a half pound to a pound is probably plenty per growing month. You don't really need to go more than that. I know a lot of people do go more than that. Turf manager that I used to work with at another school said, yeah, that's the textbook answer, but this is the real world. And I need to get 2 or 3 pounds a month to get the growth and recovery that I need to see. That's that person's prerogative, but in the transition zone, one of the issues that we see if we go higher and higher, this is a little study that I did up there in Kentucky, was 1 pound, no issues with Winterkill, 2 pounds, we're starting to get a little bit of issues, and 4 pounds, we obviously made that plant so unhealthy that going through that wintertime, it didn't appreciate it. So take it easy during the summertime. Into the fall, you can keep your fall color around a little bit longer with fall applications of nitrogen. So you can fertilize all the way up to dormancy if you choose to. The issue with that is your Bermudagrass is slowing down at that time. How much is it really taken up? Some, but probably not tons. And so you may be losing some, which is obviously environmentally not a good thing. But what's germinating and coming up at that time of the year? Your winter weeds, right? So those things will absolutely love you for fall fertilization, but the little bit of benefit that you get to your Bermudagrass, I don't think is worth it. And then potassium, we've all heard of potassium as a winterizer fertilizer, and it really is. It does a great job of causing the cells to not burst, not freeze, when the plant takes up the potassium and the plant experiences cold weather. So really good for that. But Grady Miller's research from back in the day showed that as long as your soil test potassium is adequate, that's all that matters. You don't need to be pounding your soil with potassium every fall if your soil test is already adequate. So do a great job for you, but you don't need to be putting out excessive amounts. All right.
All right, folks, now for the rest of the story, as Paul Harvey used to say, you all can wake up and let's pay attention. Dr. Munshall and I, we do get along. We do like each other. We just live two totally different lives. Dr. Munshall lives in a gated community and drives a Tesla SUV. I drive a beat-up pickup truck that I've had for 17 years. You saw him talking about the carbon emissions and high emissions, and if we have high emissions coming down here, so who drives the all-electric vehicle? Now, here's my opinions on managing Bermudagrass in the transition zone. There's 3 keys. Our fertility plan. I'm going to call it feeding the soil. Second thing is newer varieties, using Latitude, Northbridge instead of Tifway 419. And we use a lot of growth blankets. We use them in the spring. We really use them in the fall. And all of our Bermudagrass gets covered in the winter. And we have different kinds of blankets that I'll touch on a little bit later. So feeding the soil, my basic philosophy, it's kind of evolved over the years. I had a really bad growing year in 2011. Hardly none of my Bermudagrass came back. And talked to several different people. And I thought that we should probably change our fertility program. We'd been using it for years, and when I say years, it was kind of the same thing that had been going on since probably 1990. That was like 21 years. So we started using less synthetic granular fertilizer and a little bit more organic sources. We didn't completely eliminate the synthetic stuff. We used less. We were using less granular in. We started using more liquid in. That would kind of be released by the microbial activity. I started spraying molasses. A lot of people thought I was crazy.
Me included.
Yeah. As he's on his phone over there, not paying attention.
I can multitask.
Several people thought I was crazy. I'm like, hey, I'm going to give it a try, man. We talk about increasing carbs in our plant. Molasses is a sugar. Let's try it, see what it does. Spraying more foliar products that have high levels of amino acids for plant health. Amino acids are the building block for proteins. Proteins have they have a great effect on the plant structure, how healthy it is. Again, making a real effort to build up the carbohydrate level in the plant. And this is a Dr. Munshall picture of covers from his winter weeds. We don't have weeds like this on our athletic fields. But 2 basic philosophies. Set it and forget it. Just put it on and just let it ride out. Or just put it on periodically to prolong the growing season. Put it on for 3 or 4 days when the team's gone, when you got a break. Or in the spring, put it on to increase your soil temperature, to see how much Bermudagrass you're going to have, kind of show its face, see, the plan to get ahead of your competition. If you're going to have some dead spots, some winterkill, get an idea and get a jump start with your sod producer, or if you sprig or if you seed, go ahead and get that process started. And on the left here was a lightweight cover, and on the right was a heavier cover. So do covers work in the spring? So if you look up here on May 6, 2014, the high that day was 83, the low was 52. That soil thermometer is about 1 inch in the ground, and the soil temp is almost 98 degrees. We've got it heated up. Is that maybe too hot? I don't know. But we've used our blankets this way since 2012, and we've had really good success with it. One thing that we did do in 2012 that we learned from is we did the set it and forget it. We put the blankets on and we left them on for 2 weeks. And dude, when we took them off, I mean, that grass was green. It was plush. But for about 6 weeks after that, the grass didn't go anywhere. I'd used all its carbohydrates up. And you saw the slide that Dr. Munshaw had. It needs, 60 to 100 days to replenish?
Any issues, Marcus, with putting those covers on, getting your green up early, and then getting a cold snap?
Nah, maybe, yes, no, kind of. What we've done is we wait till spring football's over with. And spring football here the last 3 years or so have been over with around tax day, April 15th, somewhere in that time frame. And then we'll look at the extended forecast. Are we going to have some frosts? Are we going to have some below freezing temperatures? And if we are, we're not going to get a young plant like that heated up, kind of get all everything inside of it going, the emotions of the grass, get it going, get it think it's getting ready to go into the hottest summer, and then get cold again. So we'll wait. So we'll try to time our covers up when we know that our last frost is gone and we don't have to really worry about that stuff anymore. Because again, in 2012, man, I was stoked. Like, man, this is awesome. You know, before April 1st, got 90% green up. This is great. And then it just went south for a couple weeks, turned brown again. Yes, sir.
How are you managing your covers with regards to being overseeing the ryegrass? I guess in my instance, I took over a job where they used the covers. Basically, their overseeing wasn't so great in the fall, so they covered it up, hoping when they took the covers off in the spring, they'd have ryegrass. Well, they leave the covers off too long. It's establishing this great, standing, thick, lush ryegrass that's impossible to get rid of, and then have adverse effects on the yield.
One thing our football coach does not like is ryegrass. We've all probably heard football coaches or some kind of coaches say that ryegrass is slick. Our football coach thinks that ryegrass is slick. So when he came on board in, I guess, 2013 was his first season, we knew that. He had told us that. So we started really trying to manage how much rye we put out on our game field and our practice field. And we would, honestly, we would wait for them to leave and be off campus before we would put any ryegrass out. So we try to stay in the 15-pound range. We try not to get over top of it. We try to start out with about 5 pounds, do 5 pounds all over the field, and then just kind of watch it and then spot spread it after that. You know, if you need it between the hashes from 50 to 25, then you just seed that area that you need it. And by limiting the ryegrass, we've seen that you don't grow a big bush of ryegrass when you take the blankets off. And what we've been doing after we take our blankets off in the before spring football practice starts, we'll time our sulfonated urea spray up. What I've seen is that if we spray our sulfonated urea, regardless of what the temperature is in April, it takes 3 weeks. It takes 21 days to get complete death. It takes 14 days for you to see any type of kill, any type of change. And so for the first 14 days, you're thinking that, man, I screwed up. Like it's, I just wasted X amount of dollars per acre. This ain't going to work. Regardless of what the temperature is, regardless of what rate of the product you put out, whether you did a half rate or full rate, it still takes 3 weeks. So if our spring football is over with April 15th, I'm spraying April 1st. That way, by the time April 15th gets here, it'll just start showing a little bit of death, a little bit of injury. I don't get questions about, hey, what's wrong with the field, man? It's starting to lose color, go downhill. And then a week after that, they're not even paying attention to the fields anymore. They're worried about recruiting or going on vacation or whatever they're worried about. And then we can put the covers on. And if the temperature looks good, putting the covers on in the spring actually speeds up and increases your ryegrass kill.
You're taking it on early, so you're not going out with high rate of overseed. You're taking the covers off early, and spraying it out. The spring season comes over, then you put the covers back on.
Right. So long story short, when this football staff came on board, before that staff I've been around Kentucky for 3 head football coaches. The first 2, we could be grass growers. We would have the summer to grow grass. We could grow grass in. We could transition, like after spring football, you had all summer to get it ready. You had till August to get the field ready. When this new coach came in, his philosophy changed. As soon as spring football was over with in mid-April, you had till the first week of summer school, which is a week after Derby. So about the first, second week in May you had before they came back and they wanted to be on the grass. So try to put the covers on early, see what kind of sod you're going to need, get thick cut sod, and have it ready for them by the 1st of April or the 1st of May. And the first couple of years that we did that, it was somewhat interesting because we were dealing with Tifway 419, which Dr. Munshaw showed, not as winter hardy, not as wear tolerant as some of the newer grasses. Wrong way. So this was back from, what was that, 2016, I guess. Just some more 1-inch soil surface temperatures and kind of what the covers do. But so talking about covers, and we talked about heating the soil up and getting the Bermudagrass to kind of show itself. So last Wednesday, I went out and I took soil temperatures of all of our fields. We have native soil fields, we have USGA field, we have sand cap fields, we have Bermudagrass fields, and we have ryegrass fields. Not Bermuda overseeded with rye, but strictly ryegrass. So baseball at 1.5 inches of depth, where we had our outfielder spots covered, it was 50.8 degrees. Now uncovered, it was 42 degrees. And the cover we were using was a 3-ounce woven polypropylene cover. Practice football, I'll talk about practice football last. Game soccer, it's a sand cap field. It was covered 48 degrees, uncovered 41.8. So interesting, you got native soil that's warmer covered than covered sand cap. Does that surprise anyone? Huh? By now it's probably about 8 inches. Good point. Pores don't hold the heat in. How deep's your sand cap? What about that those facilities are on different sides of campus? The side that game soccer, practice soccer, and softball are on, they don't have necessarily the wind breaks that and the structures that baseball does. That was my thought. Again, at game soccer, the same type of cover as baseball, 3-ounce woven polypropylene. And then at practice soccer, which is just across the parking lot from game soccer, it's a sand cap field. It's brand new. It was finished in July. Covered was 47 degrees. Uncovered was 47.5 degrees. So you're probably thinking to yourself, well, that's not a big difference. But the company that made these covers did a really good job, and there's not a whole lot of space up there where there's not covered material. I just found gaps from the pins about that big where I stuck it in. So a lot of the thought process is that maybe some of that heat from the covered area is radiating to the non-covered stuff. I don't know if that's the case or not. That's a hypothesis. But that blanket is a polypropylene core sheathed in some polyethylene. It's totally different than any of the other blankets that we used. Same native soil as our baseball field at softball, which is softballs with soccer, with our 2 soccer fields on the other side of campus. Uncovered was 41 degrees. So it was about 0.6 degrees cooler on that side. So go to practice football. Covered, and that's not a typo. Covered was 48 degrees. Uncovered was 49 degrees. Type of blanket is a 4-ounce non-woven polypropylene. Why is that? Totally different than what we've seen on all the rest of the fields. Why is that? What about this material here? 4-ounce non-woven. 4 ounce is the heaviest we have. Non-woven, so there's not a lot of space for water to get through. What I haven't told you is we're just coming off more than 2 weeks of being below freezing, solid below freezing. We didn't get above 32 degrees for more than 2 weeks. So all these covers were wet. What about this one not drying out as fast, holding more water in when it does thaw out? So, one of the things that we've talked about and the gentleman back there asked about is moisture. And excess moisture is bad for Winterkill. Not enough moisture is bad for Winterkill. So, the use of covers to protect Bermudagrass, some people will debate with you that covers aren't good. I believe in covers. But let's just hypothetically say that covers don't make a difference in soil temperature. Do covers keep moisture inside your soil? Keep it from evaporating? It's a barrier. It's harder for the moisture to get out. So if you have a year where you don't have average moisture, you have less than average moisture, you're dry, you're worried about desiccation, covers will protect you a little bit from that as well too. So here's some pictures from 2012. All that is TIFWay 419. Again, it's June 8th. It's the first year of us using the blankets in the spring and about a year of my so-called feeding the soil plan of using less synthetics, more slow release more amino acids. At this point in time, I hadn't found any molasses yet. Dr. Goatley tried to get me to spray sorghum. His family is one of the largest sorghum producers in Washington County. I didn't buy that. I don't steal ideas like Munshaw does. So here's May 5th, 15, April 25th, 16. So June 8th, that's after the blankets in the spring. So we got a month earlier in May in 15 compared to June 8th in 2012. And look at the Bermudagrass we have. That's Bermudagrass. We didn't cover in between the fields. That was our test in 2016. Like to leave a test plot. That's all Bermuda. You don't see any ryegrass hanging around. We've sprayed it. We put the covers on, got it out, got it gone. That's kind of pretty impressive, I thought. I was pretty impressed with that. This area up here, this is, that's not good. It's transition area between native soil and sand cap. We got a lot of cart traffic turning in here. There we go again. 15. I mean, just look at the difference here. We got, the 20. You look at the 20 and 15 and look at the 20 and 16. The 20 and 16 looks healthier. The 25 looks healthier. The 30 looks healthier. And it's way more healthier in 2016 than it was in 2012 on June 8th. Again, another shot of that same field, but just down a little further. This got resodded. In 2015, that whole thing got resodded. This was all Tifway 419. What varieties did Dr. Munshaw talk about that are more wear tolerant and are newer varieties and are more winter tolerant than 419? What varieties did he talk about? Latitude, Northbridge. So I mentioned getting thick cut sod because of how our football coaches wanted to practice. At that point in time, up 2015, 2014, the only thick cut sod that I could find was 419. Finally, in 2015, I'd found a sod producer that had some latitude that wasn't a hot seller. It was 2 inches thick. He couldn't get rid of it. And he said, I'll make you a deal if you take it. I was like, heck yeah, I want to try a new variety. So in 15, we sodded this area with latitude. So if you look here at the 46-yard line, that's the same 46-yard line right there. We went that way with it. It looks much better. The latitude survived a whole lot better that first year. So I chose latitude because that was available. But in 2013, I had had the thought process that we were going to test right next to our filming tower where the equipment people and the trainers set up all their stuff at. This area right here was sodded half with latitude and half with Northbridge. So if you're a sod producer in here, can you tell the difference in the field if latitude and Northbridge are right next to each other? Like in a picture, can you tell? Gary? Jim? Anybody? Middle of the field, to the right was latitude. To the left was Northbridge. Can't tell a difference. It was way better than what the 419. We were having to resod this area every year, right here, because of the wear and tear from traffic and the team constantly congregating there during practice. We switched that area. That was the first time we tried any of the new varieties. It worked. We were sold. So when we build a new practice football facility, a new practice soccer facility, what varieties do we need to use? That's what we chose. We chose to use Northbridge and we chose to use latitude. So right here, 2015, this is all Tifway 419. It didn't really make it through the winter to our expectations. Like if I had all summer to grow it, I might have been able to get it grown in. But based upon what our coach wanted, our strength coach wanted, they wanted it ready to go for when they have their conditioning program during the first 4-week summer school session. So again, 15, got a good deal on some thick cut latitude. How much better did it perform in 16? Which would you rather have? Left or the right? Right. Kind of the same thing. This is a little bit better. You're seeing some wear on some hash marks, but overall it just looks better in my opinion. It performed better. So I went all the way back to 2010, and I took the average temperature and the total rainfall in Lexington from December 1st to March 15th. And I chose that time frame because there's some winters where December 1st, it's really cold. It's polar vortex year. It was down to 2 degrees December 1st. 2016, December 1st, 60, 65 degrees. Big difference. And also some of our coldest temperatures have been towards the end of February, the first part of March. So the winter of 2010, our average high was 39 degrees, our average low 26 degrees, and we had, for that time frame, we had 9.24 inches of rain. That winter, we had 8 days below freezing. That was February 10th through February 17th, and the low for that time frame was 2 degrees. 2011, 40 degrees for an average high, 27 for an average low, and we had almost 15 inches of rain. 15. Big difference. I mentioned earlier that I didn't have a lot of Bermuda come back in 2011. Did anybody remember me saying that? Does that have anything to do with it? I don't know. It might have. I thought I wasn't feeding my soil right, and I changed my fertility program. Could have been too much moisture. That same time frame, we had 7 days below freezing. When I say below freezing, I mean the high is not getting above 32 degrees. And when I say 7, it's going to be 7 continuous days. It's not just, a day here, a day there. I'm counting all the days. It's 7 continuous days. And the low was -2. That was for the whole time frame. And we can go through here and look. 2012, 50 degrees, 33, 12.7. 3 days below freezing, and the low was 13. That year in 2012, I talked about kind of changing my philosophy, the fertility program, and using covers. I sodded 28,000 square feet. That's 16%. If we're 84% successful, if we're a field goal kicker, are we good? If we're a free throw shooter, are we good? Unless you're like Kentucky and missed your last 8 last night. 80, you hit 840 in baseball, what are you? You're the GOAT, right? 84%. 2013, 46, 31, 13.7. 2 days below freezing was the longest stretch. 5 was the total low for that time frame. I've reduced my sod needed down to 22,000 square feet. 16%, 12%. So going on down the line each year. So 2014, we had 6 days below freezing. -6 was the low. I sodded 15,000 square feet. That was the polar vortex year. There was a whole lot of Bermudagrass lost in the state of Kentucky in 2015. I'm sorry, 2014, polar vortex. I sodded 15,000 square feet. That's roughly 8%. So as we were using the blankets, changed the fertility program, had a healthier soil, we've reduced the amount of Bermudagrass that's been needed. So if you get to 2015, I've got it in red there. Look at that. We had 6 days below freezing. That's not a typo. The lowest was minus 18. We didn't stay inside that day either. We shoveled snow off baseball. Baseball coaches are crazy. 13,000 square feet is what we put down in latitude. Come back the next year, we replaced 6,300 square feet of latitude. So we had 7%. We replaced in 15. We're down to 3% in 2016. Once we switched varieties, more wear tolerant, more winter tolerant. And then last year, this is what we replaced, 1,500 square feet of latitude. 1,500. That's less than 1%. Your variety matters. The type of Bermudagrass you have matters. How you feed it matters. Ingredients matter. So let's get to what really is on our minds. 2018, our average high up until January 11th was 42. Our average low was 24. So out of all these years, which one's got the lowest temperature for the average low? 2018. Here's our rainfall so far. 2.74 inches. On average, that's 2 inches below what we would normally receive December up until January 11th. And when I put this together, we had 13 days where it stayed below freezing. Since I've turned this in, there's been 5 additional days. So we're up to 18 days total so far this year where it's been below freezing. And the coldest so far has been -3. So what's going to happen? What's going to happen? Huh? You may. How many people are worried about Winterkill? How bad are you worried about it? Is it keeping you up at night? And is it keeping anybody up at night? You can't do anything about it now, can you? No, you can't do anything about it. My colleague in Louisville, at the University of Louisville, Mike Winkenhofer, we talk pretty frequently. He'll call about every other day. And I'll say, hello. Well, is the Bermudagrass dead yet? I don't know, Mike. I don't think it is. I'm like, I'm not worried about it. He's like, what do you mean you're not worried about it? I'm like, Mike, it's 1st of January. You can't control it. Why worry about stuff you can't control? Did you cover your field, Mike? Them covers don't matter. Oh, they don't? No, they don't matter. Okay.
That's a good impersonation, by the way. So yeah, covers do matter, and certainly that's a conversation with Dr. Goatley. You know, like I said, a lot of people are concerned about the loss of Bermuda this year. I've had a lot of phone calls about it, and my take on it at this point is I'm not too concerned. I think we'll have some Winterkill, but I don't think it's going to be widespread at this point, just based on what I've seen and based on the lowest temperatures that we've seen. Bermudagrasses, even tipwhite, can take it down to -9, -10 for short periods, and we have not gone anywhere near that point. And so I think we're in still pretty good shape for most areas in the transition zone. Obviously, plant health going into the winter is going to dictate a lot of how well it's going to do. But, you know, when Marcus says we can't control it now, we can't. But up until this point, during the growing season, we sure as heck can control it. Get your plants as healthy as they possibly can be.
It's like studying for Dr. Munshaw test. Do your due diligence and study ahead of time.
Dr. Munshaw,